ThatGreatBusinessShow.com is brought to you by De Facto Shaving Oil, the best anyone can get. Made in Ireland, sold worldwide.
Welcome to episode 65 of That Great Business Show, posting on the 10th of December 2021. I'm your host, Conal O'Moran, and it's always a pleasure to be in your company. On this episode, the man who last year was first to tip we'd be eating smaller turkeys for Christmas, and he's back to tell us what to expect and what not to expect from Mr. Claus this year as supply issues continue to cause worldwide problems. You have a business problem, we have a business solution. That solution may well come from KTI, also known as Knowledge Transfer Ireland. We'll tell you how to get big brains to work to make your product or services better. And if you think it's hard to get a tradesperson at the moment, just wait for another year or two and they will be like water in the desert, because we're not training them, and we have a man in to vent his spleen on the subject. All of this on what you call Ireland's best business podcast. And before I forget, I was talking to the boys at Bannister Board Game that we had on the show a few weeks back. They tell me that there is the grand total of just 400 boxes of their game left. So as soon as you hear this, do get onto the Smith Toys or Art and Hobby websites to secure what is easily the best board game for 8 to 14-year-olds this year. And it is that time of year, so if you're looking for something small a child can give an adult, maybe granddad, look no further than De Facto Shaving Oil, made in Mayo by our sponsor, and sold worldwide to our listeners. A bottle costs just €13 and will be a nice daily reminder that someone cares. It's also a breeze to get through airport security, your ideal travelling companion.
That Great Business Show.
When someone gives you good business advice, it's normal to go back and ask for more. Christine's first joined us on episode 3 of That Great Business Show, way back then. And he was the first person that I know of who told the world to expect smaller turkeys for Christmas. And because his forecasting was so good, we had him back on episode 38 to talk about worldwide supply chains, because that is what Crane Worldwide Logistics specialises in. And since he was last with us, Chris has been elevated from Managing Director Ireland to Director of Sales for all of EMEA at Crane. So well done, Chris. You must be doing something right. And now, because it's that time of year again, we had to have Father Chris, do you like that? Back again to hear what's really happening in the world of containers and what it could mean for under the tree as well, maybe for the construction businesses, for those badly needed windows and screws and plumbers, supplies. All of that has gone missing, but Christine's is not. He's with me here in studio. Welcome to That Great Business Show, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Are you looking for a professional contract? This is number 3 you've been in with us.
Yeah, it's the third time I've been, and I'm actually very grateful to be here.
Not at all. Well, you asked me beforehand, cash only, is that how you do it? Oh yeah, Chris, thanks anyway for coming in. I've been reading, just like you. I mean, you probably live it every hour of every day, but I keep reading since we probably first met all about what's going on in the big bad world of containers. And it was bad. But did I read recently that things are getting a little bit better?
Softening slightly, I would say. I think everybody now knows the impacts of supply chain, and everyone really kind of has been kind of impacted in some way, shape or form with supply chain. To answer your question, is it easing? I would say the market is slightly softening, still very, very upside down and heavy congestion.
Where are you seeing the big problems?
Well, Asia continues to be a challenge. Asia, US, you can see, I mean, US is a huge challenge in some of the ocean ports. You see some of the ocean containers out in sea. There's a couple of hundred of them at some point.
And just to put those couple of hundred, and I've dealt with this before, into some context, one ship had 22,000 containers on it. Yeah. Multiply that by 100, you get into massive amounts.
I mean, you think about the billions of dollars that is caught up in trade on the ocean. I mean, it's significant to a lot of people. But not only in the US and Asia, we're also starting to see the congestion in Europe. The airports, the handling sheds are struggling to deal with the capacity. Brexit hasn't helped. COVID hasn't helped. COVID restrictions haven't helped. So it's just, although some would say it's kind of softening slightly, it's still pretty much upside down.
Now you come in with a big list, so tell me what's on the list of where are the worst problems?
I think there's a number of different challenges, right? You've obviously got COVID, you've got the congestions at the ports, and you've got congestions at the airports. COVID, as I mentioned, you've also got labour shortages. You've got driver shortages in Ireland, UK.
I read that that's about to ease. Don't ask me how, but it's suddenly, you cannot train HGV drivers overnight.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one. I mean, this has been a kind of a subject that's been bubbling for quite some time, right? And it came in recently in Ireland with the fuel, but it was highlighted through our haulage to our hauliers, that like the significance of them. The UK has had a problem. Mainland Europe continues to have a problem. Then you've also got to remember, with Brexit, a lot of these drivers don't want to, European or Irish drivers don't want to go through the UK.
Yeah, too much hassle.
Yeah.
Okay. What does that mean for, say, the building trade? I was looking, there's a house down beside me, and I think we're waiting for 6 months for so-called, and I say that deliberately, so-called Irish-made windows to come in from Lithuania. I think there was a big sticker on them saying made in Ireland. The guys who delivered were quick to tell me they came in from Lithuania. So I presume that's still a problem, isn't it?
It's a huge problem, and that just goes back to what I've just said, right? So Lithuania, Eastern Europe, you've got a driver shortage in Europe, you've got increased fuel prices, you've got driver shortage, capacity shortage, lack of options on the short sea, avoiding the UK land bridge because of Brexit and the complications that brings. So you bundle all them together, and there's a multitude of different issues. So it continues to create a problem.
But you're still in business, probably making an even bigger profit. So how are you doing that?
Well, I think I was only talking to somebody earlier on in this. There's not been a better time to be in the industry that we're in, right?
Lucky for you.
For so long, this industry's been really, really challenging, really difficult, a kind of a slog day in, day out. What we see now is...
Nobody loved you.
No.
And everybody loves you now.
But nobody, I don't, with the greatest respect in the world, I don't think anybody truly understood what we did, right? Logistics and supply chain was a word that was used, but nobody really kind of understood until your parcel doesn't arrive, you've ordered something and it's taken 6 to 8 weeks, you're getting notification delays. So now it's an amazing industry to be in because it's so fast paced. It's changing every day. There's endless amounts of opportunities to be different, be creative, do something different, because at the end of the day, all people want to do is for you to help them. They want you to get the product.
So what are you guys doing to get me my Christmas presents ASAP? Is there anything clever happening?
Well, there's a number of different things we've kind of done, right? And through some of our biggest global companies and some of our biggest global clients who wanted to ensure that they had the product on the shelf for Christmas. So we've chartered a lot of our own aircraft out of Asia. A significant amount. We've a weekly charter going into the US, and we've a weekly chartered aircraft going into Europe.
Now, is this one aircraft or a number of them? Or
well, we've one a week, so
okay.
2 US and 1 a week to Europe, right? And what it does is it gives us that capacity and that uplift to get freight for our clients out of these manufacturing sites quickly.
I'm going to ask you a question that I possibly think that you may not know the answer to. How much freight relative to containers can go into an aircraft? My head can't even imagine.
Well, I mean, you're probably talking 50 ton plus of air freight, depending on the size of the aircraft, right?
And what goes into a container?
One container, depending on the payload, you can get, and depending on what way it's packaged, you've got to remember, you can stuff a container.
Well, say a stuffed container.
You can get anything. I mean, 100 ton.
So therefore, one aircraft is half a container of that.
Yeah.
That's not a lot.
But depending on the product then, right? So we've got some of the biggest multinational companies that products as small as a phone or even smaller with significantly high value. You can imagine the amount of them put onto an aircraft.
Were you telling me previously about Rolexes or about those fixes?
Yeah.
How's the market in getting your Rolex fixed?
Well, I still think that the problem we face is that was a UK Brexit related issue, right? So a lot of the top watch manufacturers that sell in Ireland or the top watch companies that sell product in Ireland, the repair centres are in the UK. So there was huge challenges back and forth, and it still continues to be a challenge. But the only thing that's different now is people have the answer. There's still the complexity. There's still the paperwork.
Don't buy expensive watches.
We know what we're doing this time.
So what else is available or not available? Or can you see what easings are there? I better ask you because I know I'll forget it and I'll let you out of the studio. And I said, God, what size turkey are we going to have this year?
Well, it's funny, right? Because I was actually thinking about this, right? So, and there was a recent study done by the British Poultry Council, right, to say that turkeys, there's enough turkey to go around for everyone, right? But typically 9 million. So I'll take the UK as the example because we were talking about this internally in the business the other day. Generally, 9 million turkeys are primed for Christmas in the UK, right?
Primed. That's another word for it.
Yeah. But according to the Poultry Council now, that number has been significantly reduced, right? But not only
As in the availability. Okay.
Not only has it significantly reduced, what you've got to also factor in is there's been an increase in demand and less production in the likes of the feed, the netting, the plastic, the packaging, everything that packages a turkey to get onto the shelves. So you've got to reduce. So there's still a demand. You've got a reduce in capacity. You've got an increase in cost. So you'll have a choice for turkey, but it won't be as widespread as it would have been historically.
And one other thing to throw into the mix there, because it looks like it's only happened in the last week or two, avian flu seemingly has gone through the bird population in the UK in a very, very big way. And I presume it'll land over here because travels in the air.
Yeah.
So, and tip number one from Christine's is buy your turkey today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And keep it well frozen is probably the answer. What else should we be looking out for? And what is Mr. Claus going to be short of, do you think?
Well, I think what you've got to do, there's a huge, in Asia, in the semiconductor business, and a lot of the semiconductor business is feeding the phones and the smartwatches and the tablets and stuff. There's a huge kind of reduction in manufacturing there due to COVID outbreaks, due to labour shortages, due to a number of different reasons, but there's a huge reduction in semiconductors. So therefore, there's a huge reduction in the key components that go into smartwatches, phones, etc., etc. And you only have to listen this morning to one of the biggest tech giants announced the share price had significantly increased. But interestingly,
they're tipping $3 trillion in value.
Yeah.
And as somebody was listening to it, was saying, I don't even know how many zeros that is. That's a lot.
Yes. But what was more interesting, which probably to me, this is on the backdrop of some key component supply constraints. So what they mean by that is a lot of the parts that they're trying to get that go into the phone is in heavy demand and low supply. So
prices are going to go up.
Yeah.
Simple as.
That's exactly it. And
higher prices, bigger profits.
And they're looking for a 3 billion. So there you go.
Trillion. It's a trillion. I think that's 1,000 billion, which is 1,000 million, is it? It's a lot.
But even household appliances.
Like what?
Like your everyday household appliances, toasters, washing machines, fridges, they're all victims of the shortage too.
Okay.
Right? So it's just this kind of perfect storm.
Christmas this year.
No, I'm not agreeing by any means, but it's just this perfect storm. There's the demand is still there. There's just, with all the stuff that's going on, so you've got congestion at all the ports. You've got labour shortages and factory close downs. You've got the COVID restrictions. You've got the driver shortage. Not to mention in the US, you've got an aging rail infrastructure, right? So the product moving around the US to get to the ports, etc., is a challenge. So you've got all these.
Yeah. But that's the problem. We need answers. We need fixes.
So some of the creative things we've done in Crane Worldwide would be...
You mentioned you took your aircraft.
We've took the aircraft, right? And that's been a huge relief. We've chartered vessels, which is ocean vessels, which we've taken our own, and we've put our own...
But come here to me. I know so little about this. You don't just go down the road and look at a vessel and say, I wonder, could I borrow that or could I hire that for a while?
Now, there's a number of different scale and sizes of vessels that you can charter. We part chartered as well, which is taking up a block space of 100, 200, 500, whatever the number be of containers, just to ensure that we get capacity, availability, we get a sailing date, we get an arrival date. So we've done air and we've done ocean in terms of sourcing availability of space. what we've also done is we've seen a huge shift in the rail product, and I may have mentioned this before, but rail freight out of Asia.
You told me this the last time, and my jaw literally went, come on. They are shipping by the old choo-choo train.
Rail can, and it's our fastest growing product in Crane in the last 18 months. The price point is about 75% of what an ocean container would cost out of Asia. The transit time is about 16 days, give or take, depending on.
It's not bad, is it?
No, it's actually really, really good.
But now, again, I know so little about rail, is when you ship out of, say, China and bring it around and off.
Up through Russia, Kazakhstan, and in through Eastern Europe.
Okay, that takes 16 days to get to somewhere in Europe, is it? Right?
Yeah, Germany, depending on where usually Duisburg in Germany that you would see, or somewhere in Poland, depending on the rail operator and stuff. But you've got a number of different changeovers. Not every product is suited because there's the shock and there's the weather exposure, etc. But it's a really, really slick project.
And how long are these trains? Are these a mile long or 10 miles long?
Yeah, well, there's massive. I don't know the exact length, but there's massive amount of containers that go on them. And one of the things we've done on that is we've kind of blocked out space agreements on trains as well. So what people want to know is, can you move me product, or have you got a solution? Everyone knows, or the media is fairly well briefed on what the challenges are. But you've got to just continue. You've got to find a solution. So we've got air, ocean and rail kind of chartered and dedicated to ourselves in order to make it happen. And it's worked really, really well. I
love the idea of the trains. I don't know, it kind of brings me back to the old black and white movies or something.
But what's going to happen is that is out in our organisation on that Asian lane, just the Asian lane. It's starting to match and outgrow that demand, right? Because it's
at last. That's a chink, isn't it, that we can actually see? You're saying that it's outgrowing the supply. So that means that it's good.
It's a fantastic service. I mean, it really, really, it's what it is. It's in its infancy. We're developing it every day. We know how to execute it. We've put an amazing amount of resource behind it to make it successful. But it will come more and more common in the months and years ahead. You'll see a lot more people talking about it, and it'll become more common in the workplace.
Love the idea of that. So back to what else will I expect?
Well, I think with the semiconductors, that goes into so much. It goes into cars. So the car manufacturing, you'll see there's be a huge slowdown in that. Game consoles, there'll be a huge slowdown in terms of demand on that.
Harm in that.
Exactly. So I mean, everything is touched at some everything is touched either by labour shortages or the semiconductor or COVID restrictions and closing of manufacturing. Because you've got to remember, in Asia for a long time, at the drop of a hat, they were closing manufacturing plants down because of COVID outbreaks.
Yeah, but they're also opening them up at the simple, you're open again, go.
Yeah, exactly.
Go.
So the supply for everything I see is going to continue to be a challenge.
Challenge, yeah. Better, worse than last Christmas?
I think we're more, I wouldn't say better or worse. I think what it is now is we're more versed. We've got more of an idea and a handle on it. There's better planning. We've got 12 months of this COVID, whereas before we didn't really know what was happening. Now we've kind of had the whole year to map it out and look at it. And a lot of the solutions we've got in place for peak, or what we call peak for Christmas, we've had in place all throughout the year because the market has been in turmoil ever since.
So if you are handling peak when we get into January, February, March, maybe it could mean that you'll start easing the whole backlog.
Yeah, and the challenge you have with the backlog is, and where the inflation is coming from, a lot of product that would have typically moved on the ocean, and people could have lived with a 28 to a 30-day transit time, for example.
Is that what it takes from China to Europe? Yeah.
In around 28 to 30 days.
And so back to your train, that's 16 days.
16 days.
That is a significant difference.
Into the Europe point, yeah. And then you distribute from there.
Yeah, but that's only day or day and a half or whatever, yeah?
Well, depending on availability of drivers and trucks, etc. But yeah, in the main, it is a lot better. But people are now flying product that they would have typically put on the ocean, low value product.
But that obviously costs again.
And that's where the inflation goes up. But then that's moving a problem out of ocean ports congestion into airports congestion. So and then you've got congestion and an inflation. there's so many. So into next year, I don't see it slowing down. I certainly don't see it slowing down in Q1. I think this time next year it will be softer. I don't believe by any means it'll be anywhere near pre-COVID levels of any ocean, air, rail, road. I think we're still going to have challenges into next year.
What is your top tip for what some people should? I'm going to tell the world, because we believe in this, is obviously go local, buy as local as you can. What would Christine's be doing this Christmas?
I mean, for this Christmas, I'm probably a little bit late in the day now to give this advice, but I would have sourced a lot earlier.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah. If only you come to me earlier.
And I would, like, I mean, you've got to look at where you're sourcing. So the e-commerce world is incredibly, right? I mean, it's a massive growing industry, but you've got to look to where it's sourcing from. One of the things that I've done personally is I've changed my Amazon from Amazon UK to Amazon Germany.
Why?
Because
I love these little tips. I love them.
Because of the Brexit and the complications of.
Okay. And does that avoid your VAT?
It does, and it avoids your custom clearance, and the goods are moving in free circulation and stuff like that. So a little tip like that would be helpful.
Okay. And why Germany? Why not? I mean, I'm only asking this out of pure interest. Why not Amazon France or Amazon?
Well, there was no rhyme or reason, but it was Amazon mainland Europe. Yeah. That was one of the big tips, and I very little delays in no delays really. Because one of the things I did too recently was I ordered something online from the UK naively, didn't realise it was coming from the UK, and was hit with duty. Oh yeah! When it arrived at the front door.
Yeah.
And
cash,
the duty,
please.
Yeah.
And who has cash?
So exactly. And so that was a learning that I knew about, but I didn't practice because I was kind of busy and I was half doing it. But I would say you got to source.
You mean you were doing it on your work time? Yeah.
But what you got to do is look to where you're sourcing from. I mean, there's a lot of local or European, and what we say to companies as well is you've got to look at your own supply chain and you've got to mitigate the risk. And we've said this for the last 18 months. There was a heavy reliance on Asia for manufacturing. Huge. And it was only when this all started that people kind of started to look to diversify. There's huge markets out there that even Europe is starting to come back in terms of the manufacturing.
It's great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good to see. Come here to me. You know the last question we always ask, because you've only been on twice before. This is your third time. You are the most Everest honest on the show so far. Do you know that?
Really?
Yep. Nobody else has done a 3.
And I'm delighted. I'd hope they'd come back again. Make it 4.
Hire in a heartbeat. Who would you hire in a heartbeat? I can't even remember who you
I did say before. Richard Branson.
And I keep telling people, don't do Richard Branson. I bet he didn't invite you down to his island to play tennis, did he? He had a tennis tournament down the other day.
Did he?
He did.
And then who I would hire now, there's a guy called, and I don't know whether you know him, Brian Penny, who is an Irish Dublin guy.
No.
He is it's a fascinating story. I mean, not to go into it, but he's a fascinating guy. But he was an ex-addict, and he's kind of completely torn his life around, and he's studied and he's really educated himself, and he does a lot of these speaks and stuff. And he recently released a book. So, and I follow him a lot on LinkedIn and on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, and he's really, really good.
Good.
So he's one to watch out for.
If he's living in Dublin or in
He's
Ireland,
a Dublin man, yeah.
Well, we might even try to bring him on.
Yeah. And
on the recommendation of Christine's, who has, as I mentioned, a Europe-wide title now, Head of Sales.
Head of Sales, yeah.
EMEA, Europe, Middle East and Africa, for a Crane, and that's named after a Mr. Crane, Worldwide Logistics. Chris, as usual, thanks so much for joining us on That Great Business Show.
Thank you.
Viscosity. When you shave, you want the highest viscosity because it helps the blade run smoother. De facto, the world's best shaving oil, has incredible viscosity. That's why De facto leaves your face, underarms or legs nick-free. Higher viscosity makes blades last longer. De facto is the best for your skin and your pocket. DeFactoShave.com.
Everyday accounting can be a bit of a drama for SMEs. However, BigRedCloud.com takes the drama away with its simple and easy to use cloud-based accounting and payroll software designed for SME owners. Raise and send invoices, manage VAT reports and obligations, run management reports, link directly to Irish banks, automatically import purchase invoices, and so much more. All with 5-star customer support. BigRedCloud.com, 100% Irish owned and a proud member of Team GBS.
We love hearing from Team GBS, and we have very regular chats with team members on our LinkedIn page where anyone at all can read about what's going on, what's coming up on the podcast, and if you'd like your business to feature on what you say is Ireland's best business podcast, use our LinkedIn page to get in touch with us there. And do please press the subscribe button on the podcast page of your favourite podcast platform.
Backing great women-led businesses on every show. That Great Business Show.
Knowledge Transfer Ireland, or KTI, they try to make it simpler for businesses and research-performing organisations to work together, maximising the extent to which the state-funded technology, ideas and expertise gets into the hands of businesses to drive innovation and economic growth. Since KTI's launch in 2014, over 240 new products and services have been brought to market as a result of companies accessing technology and ideas from research, basically using the big brains. The boss at KTI, Alison Campbell, is a very interesting British woman who has had the kind of circuitous business career that we love here at Team GBS, but she's actually here to explain how KTI can help your business. Alison Campbell, welcome to That Great Business Show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I can't leave listeners hanging about your circuitous route. Give us a 1 minute or 2 minute précis of how you ended up running KTI in Ireland.
I think it's fair to say I started off just literally across the pond on the Wirral in Merseyside, dipped down south to London for quite a while at university and a few jobs. And my jobs ended up being, I'm a scientist, but they're in research commercialisation. So working with companies, starting new companies, dealing with that thing called intellectual property that frightens everybody, but is not scary, as I'm going to prove. And then this job came up over here, and what a great opportunity. I had a sense as to what was going on in the country in this area, and I knew that there was a lot of ambition, and it just looked great. So
you were headhunted. Tell the truth. You were headhunted.
It always sounds terribly grand when you say you're headhunted, and I often say, the headhunters hunt many heads, but there's only very few that actually get put on a pole.
And your husband, is it Peter, said the reason that you got the job is because of the amount of work that you put into it.
He did mention that, yes. I remember turning to him and saying, oh gosh, do you think I should take this job? I said, they've offered it to me now. It means going back to Ireland. He always laughs when I say going back because, of course, I didn't start there. And he just looked at me and said, yeah, he said, I think you put a lot of effort in. I think you quite want this, don't you? So I think there's only one answer. And so the journey began. So I came over first and then Peter followed.
And since then, 2014?
Yep.
That is, you've been knocking out, 240 odd, because I think it's even above that now, companies that you've actually helped along the way. Now, when I say you're kind of like are you a marriage arranger? Would that be it?
I think less a marriage arranger and more potentially the concierge. I sometimes like to think we're the Brown Thomas concierge, actually. But that's maybe because I just like to dress up. No. And seriously, what we do is we showcase. We're a shop window, and we provide lots of tools, resources, just practical information to help companies find their way through to, as you said, the big brains, the right kind of people who can help them, who are sitting in the colleges. And there's a whole group of people there who are just waiting to hear from companies. So
I am an SME who wants to become bigger than an SME. So do I phone up KTI? Do I go onto the website? What do I do to find out I'm going to make something up? I'm in food manufacturing, and I want somebody who's very clever about some aspect of food. Do I get onto KTI?
You do. I mean, a first point of call is to come to our website, www.knowledgetransferireland.com. But come to our website and you can find your way around there quite easily. So you can see quite easily on a map who's doing what where. You can search for research experts. You can search for the funding that's available to help you work with them. And I have to say, there's just a vast array of different funding supports out there that really help companies. And then you can get yourself connected really quickly.
And I think I had a lady on from a Tangent company, which is Tangent is in Trinity. And she was referring to monies that they got out of Europe. And I went, wow, there was a big fund that I had never heard of. And I normally, I come across many of these funds. there are funds in Europe that remain untapped or relatively untapped?
There's lots of European money. And actually, although untapped, I'd say Ireland has a very, very good track record in drawing down funding from Europe, and we need to do more of it. And some of the reasons that we're particularly good at it is we've got a fabulous European office, which is based in Enterprise Ireland, that's there to support and to help people and make them aware of what's available to them. So yeah, there's funding available in the country, and there's funding available in Europe. So it's some of it is about need to find the funding, need to put an application in for funding.
Now the application.
Scary. See, this is scary. I'm here to demystify it.
But I've been told that you could die because it takes so long to fill out one of those application forms.
Well, it depends which application form you're talking about. But a lot of the work that you can do and the funding that you can get can often be in collaboration with, guess what? The third level. And you know what researchers are really good at doing?
Filling forms.
Filling in funding applications, because that is their lifeblood. So actually, and there are, again, the supports within the colleges to help with that in some respects. So all of this I always think it always sounds quite intimidating. You're the SME. And you're thinking, I need to innovate. Now, first of all, that's not good enough, because what we really need to know is how or why you need to innovate. But again, lots of ways to approach this. So you can come to KTI, but you can also figure out what you need to do to innovate potentially by actually talking to some people within Enterprise Ireland. Then you decide what you want, come to us, figure out where the food research experts might be, figure out where the manufacturing experts might be. I say figure out, it's really easy. You just tap a few keywords in and it pops up. And then that will send you directly to the people that you want to talk to. But that sounds daunting in itself. And we've got a lot of information that tells you what to expect and how to
you have
land.
referenced to Enterprise Ireland a couple of times there, because I should explain you are either a sister organisation or a mother and daughter organisation with Enterprise Ireland.
Oh, I think we're a special child relationship, really. So when we were set up, it was really interesting. It was the back of a government task force. And it was really this was back in 2012. And it was looking at what can we do. There were investors, there were researchers, there were people who work in research commercialization in the innovation offices, the government agencies. Key question, what can we do to help and make even better engagement for researchers with the research base? Whole bunch of recommendations and something called a protocol that came out that just started to explain things. Last recommendation, my words are not theirs, create an office and appoint somebody to keep worrying about this. And so I'm here. So we're based in Enterprise Ireland. We're funded in large part through Enterprise Ireland, and they've been a fabulous support. We're accountable to the Irish Universities Association and also into the Department for Enterprise. And we've got quite a nice link through to the Department for Further and Higher Education too. So a very rounded kind of function we sit there, which means we can tap into a lot of people and resources and help point people in the right direction.
Whet my appetite about the funds that may be available across Europe, because again, going back to that, I can't remember the exact company, but I remember that she was talking, and it was a she, about hundreds of millions of euro being available across Europe for some particular funds. Is that a possibility?
Yes, and in fact, it's available in many different kinds of formats. There's funding to get companies going, to stimulate new research and innovation in companies. There's funding for particular kinds of collaboration. I'd really say just have a look on, as I would, the KTI website. We've got a really nice find a funding tool, and that will direct you once you've entered in a very few key criteria that just help zone down. For example, I am an SME. That will help show you what might be available. That'll give you access to all of the different funding schemes that are out there that you might think about. And some of them won't necessarily be completely obvious. And we've only got the open schemes on there. I think there's nothing worse than arriving somewhere thinking, oh, that looks good for me, and then discovering it closed last November.
I see what you mean by, I was wondering what a closed scheme
open
would be.
means they're open to you to apply for.
And it is, but they are constantly being reopened or opened, and there's constant funding all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some have very finite timescales. Others can be open-ended. But I think as well, if you look to the Irish system, going back to I'm an SME, yeah, mega bucks available in Europe, and you do need to think about that, and it's a great asset. And then here in Ireland, going back to my It's Not All Scary, there's some great funding available. A 5K innovation voucher, really easy to get your hands on again from Enterprise Ireland, but its job is to help stimulate competitiveness in Irish companies. You can take that and you can go and spend that with a college to solve a problem. And we've got loads of examples of different kinds of companies and organisations that have gone to our colleges, particularly our institutes of technology, to get help.
And you are now going to give me 2, 3, 4, 5 examples, simple examples.
I am. So in the manufacturing space, there's a group called SEAM, Southeastern Manufacturing and Materials. We've had companies go along there needing to look at certain, process improvements. And, within 3 to 6 months, they've actually got a solution. So for them, it might be a technology solution that they're looking at. And that's helped them. In certain cases, we've actually seen companies who've said that tiny process optimization has been enormously valuable because actually it's given us a big cost benefit, which then means we are far more competitive in the marketplace. So that's one example. If you were to go to Athlone, they're fantastic in terms of polymer science and packaging. Who doesn't need something packaged these days? I mean, they really are the tip-top experts. Same kind of thing.
Talk to me through packaging. I want to package my watch here. So what will they do with that? Now, I'm not expecting you to package it for me, but I am a watch manufacturer here. Okay, that's a long shot, but I need packaging for it. I go and chat with them. And they say, this is the answer, or they'll do it for me, or?
So they probably, if you need a square box or a round box, they may not be the people for you. But what they will be very good at, because they specialise in, particularly in polymer sciences, is that they'll be able to help you if you have a particular need. Let's say you're the food manufacturer, and you actually want to find a way of keeping your products fresher for longer. They can potentially help you with that. Or you're interested in biodegradable, you're sick of all this plastic. What can you do instead? But what's going to work in this particular environment or context? What's not going to droop and fall over? They can help you with that. And sometimes it's not necessarily you're going to go to the college and it's going to turn a handle and it's going to pop out something new for you. Sometimes it's just going and getting a piece of advice that can put you in the right direction, sometimes in terms of your own thinking.
So I am that manufacturer, that ham sandwich manufacturer. Do I pick up the phone to KTI or do I go to Athlone to have that chat? Or, what's the easiest, best?
Well, I would really, you can do either, of course, because it would be terrible to say, oh, don't call us. But in truth, I think if you go on our website, you discover that Athlone is the place for you, which should be actually fairly obvious. This is by no means difficult. You've got the phone number of the people to phone up, phone them. Cut out the middleman, go directly there, which is back to we're the concierge. I guess the top thing we want to do is just make it easier for companies to navigate their way around what can seem like a very complicated system.
You had awards recently, and I went through them, and the top 6 ones that I suppose I looked at the headlines of them, they all seem to be very high-end, scientific-type projects.
I think it's fair to say that when we're looking at a lot of the connections that are made with what we would call the research-based colleges. For companies, it's often around science, the STEM sciences, as they were. But I tell you, one of the companies that won one of the great projects was a company called Expleo. Now, that's actually a startup company, and by its very definition, it started from nothing. And that's actually based on software. Software algorithms, they can really help lots of different companies around that whole diversity and inclusion space. So really, very, very topical at the moment. That's not necessarily the deep tech that you immediately think about. But I would say that, in terms of the winners of some of our awards, again, for a smaller company, don't be put off by that. This is just about the awards are showcasing the scale of the ambition in Ireland and what can happen. And a lot of those awards are actually based on a very long history of collaboration and research that takes a long time to get to fruition, which is why earlier I was saying, that there's something there for many different kinds of companies. I talked about dipping your toe in the water with a 5K voucher, get a problem solved. There's funding available to do some work that can be a little more enduring. You can have an innovation partnership where up to 80% of the costs of a collaboration are paid. You can find the right format for you, whether it's little, whether it's bigger. And then there's a whole sort of consultancy support, some of which is advice. So not just turning the handle and doing science for you, but actually going to talk to people who know about stuff and know about good stuff and can give you some advice. One of our winners, you mentioned the awards, was the Inishowen Rivers Trust. That was shortlisted. It was a consultancy project with Trinity. And that was actually about being able to match up through their consultancy support service and match up the charitable trust with some experts in-house who could go and help them think through flood management. Again, not necessarily the deep tech that you're thinking of.
And the concern for many would be, once I pick up the phone, is the meter running? Who pays, or how am I invoiced or billed?
So if you're looking for, let's say, some degree of consultancy support, just of the nature that I've previously described, it may well be that you pay for that, but that's normally at the stage where you've discussed what the issue is, what your problem statement might be, and decided if you can work together. At that stage, a price might be put on it. But then I go back to, get yourself a 5K innovation voucher. Go have somebody sort of solve your problem there. And the initial conversations are always going to be free of charge.
Unlike going to the doctor who'll charge you 150 quid to tell you you're fine. What are the absolute do not do?
The do not do. Well, it depends what context that's in, doesn't it?
What are the ones that kind of, you say, oh, for God's sake, what are they doing that for? Or what? That's the wrong kind of company for us.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, that the big do not is don't turn up without an idea of what you might want or why. And maybe the why is more important than the what. And don't imagine that you need to keep all your cards close to your chest, because unless you can actually explain clearly what you need and why you need it and what you're hoping for, it's actually quite difficult. I mean, let's face it, it's quite difficult to strike any kind of relationship if you're not going to be open and honest about it. And that's quite important.
My great friend Terry McManus always says that an idea stuck in a drawer is not a business.
Very true.
Which is, yeah. You may not know that our final question that we ask people is, who would you hire in a heartbeat? I hope you were told about this, were you?
Who would I hire in a heartbeat? Do you know, there are actually so many different kinds of people that one might want to hire in a heartbeat. I tell you somebody who we all see a lot of at the moment, actually Luke O'Neill from Trinity. Now, why, you might ask? Several things. He's entrepreneurial. Very successful.
Entrepreneurial.
We need that. Very successful. Really big network, which is great. Really generous with his time. But one of the things I really like, as I think people may have picked up in the media, he is candid and he tells it like it is. And that, I think, is just brilliant in terms of disruptive innovation and actually getting you places that you might want to be.
So I think Luke O'Neill, he's hired. That is Alison Campbell, Director at KTI Knowledge Transfer Ireland, and thank you so much for joining us on That Great Business Show.
Thinking of travel? If so, make sure to make De Facto, the world's best shaving oil, your choice of travel companion. A 25 millilitre bottle of De Facto means no hassle at airports, no bulky cans to carry, and the guarantee of the world's best shave. DeFactoShave.com.
Everyday accounting can be a bit of a drama for SMEs. However, BigRedCloud.com takes the drama away with its simple and easy to use cloud-based accounting and payroll software designed for SME owners. Raise and send invoices, manage VAT reports and obligations, run management reports, link directly to Irish banks, automatically import purchase invoices, and so much more. All with 5-star customer support. BigRedCloud.com, 100% Irish owned and a proud member of Team GBS.
Subscribe today to That Great Business Show on your favourite podcast platform, including Apple and Spotify.
If you work in or run a business that has just been cut back again due to COVID, you're rightly hating what seems to be an unending pandemic. We feel for you, and for all our sakes, we hope that this nightmare will all end soon. For others, however, COVID has actually helped their businesses, forcing change like going more online or fully digital on businesses who, for many reasons, were happy to procrastinate. My next guest is the boss at a company called Expleo. And, as I do, I looked up Dr. Google to find out more about this fast-growing digital transformation company. And what I found was a video of Expleo Managing Director Phil Codd sitting on a chair, talking to the camera with a saxophone beside him. However, he never played the sax. So, Phil Codd, what was that all about?
Hi, Connell. Thank you very much for the introduction. And you're very kind.
There was a saxophone sitting not a foot or 2 feet away from you.
There was. It was a useful prop. We thought that would just add that value and would actually get people to question it. But when I turned 50, which is only, let's say, 2-3 years ago, my children bought me a saxophone because each birthday would come along and I'd get socks and CDs and a book. And I'd always squeeze the package and say, oh, I don't think that's a saxophone. And then one day I got one. So what I've discovered is I have a great ability to play 3 tunes on most instruments, and the saxophone is one of those. I can play 3 tunes on that.
So you can play the saxophone, but you didn't play the saxophone on this video.
No, I don't think that would have been fair to the audience that we were aiming at. But the following year, I also got a flute. And I discovered that the fingering for a saxophone is the same for a flute, except obviously this is down there and that's up here. If you can imagine that on the podcast.
Gestured on a podcast.
So I can then play a similar 3 tunes on the flute. So I play all these instruments very badly, but to my own amusement.
Good, because we had another woman on called Michelle O'Keefe. She is with Goodbody, and off air she was telling me that she plays the saxophone, and I always find it very interesting what people do in their spare time. Bill Clinton is a saxophonist as well, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Is that who you really take after, yeah?
No, I think Woody Allen is also a saxophonist.
Is he not a clarinetist?
He's also a clarinetist, which is, again, the blow-in is kind of where you get the sound from. So very similar type instruments, different sounds, obviously, and similar fingering.
Have I now proven that we do business differently here?
Possibly so. I'm also Kito, so that's one of the other challenges.
Does that throw your fingering? It does if you're Kito, yeah.
Well, interestingly, I tend to be left-handed with the way I write, and anything that requires 2 hands would be in a right-handed manner. But anything that requires 1 hand, such as a tennis racket or a squash racket, I would play left-handed.
Yeah. Which throws your golf as well if you play golf.
Golf, because it's you need 2 hands. I play it badly, and I must say very badly, right-handed. And I think probably that's where it's got me. I should have played it left-handed. It is where it all went wrong.
You could have been Tiger.
I could have been, yeah.
With the exception of the car crash. Anyways, you better start telling us, otherwise the PR people go mental. What does Expleo actually do?
That's a good question. And probably if you ask many of our staff, you'll get many answers. But I
went online, I had a look at them, and I saw them all saying, first day at Expleo, and it was in French, and it was, I think, possibly Italian and.
Yeah, we're a global company. We're about 15,000 people spread across about 35 countries.
Whoa, so I didn't know you were that big.
Relatively big. Here in Ireland, we're about nearly 700 people now, spread between Dublin and Belfast. And our specialism is in IT consultancy, and then secondly, engineering, and thirdly, in management consultancy. So I like to think of us as being at the heart of the market. So where there's significant change for companies that's generally underpinned by an IT program or an IT project. And quite often, Expleo is in there somewhere. And good examples of that could be, for example, when Air went to quad play, so they moved to mobile broadband, set-top box and fixed line.
I was wondering whether you'd remember them all.
Yeah, I wasn't sure, actually. I had to count. We were in the middle of that program. And
is that why? Because Expleo is or has a French parent, and if I remember, Air has a French parent. Is that a connection?
I know we were working with Air long before we became a French parented company, and indeed before Air became a French parented company. But there's in conversations with some of their execs, there's definitely a nuance to working for a French company. Prior to that, we were a German company.
What is that, though?
It's the process. As I say, we were with a German company originally, and the process is quite clear. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not, but the process is pretty clear, and you start there and get to the end. We found that with French companies, and this is a big generalization, you do the first bit and see how that goes, and then you do the next bit, and you might go back to the first bit and tweak that again, and then continue on. And it becomes very prevalent when you're doing budgeting, which we've just finished this week, and it's an interesting route to get to the end. You do get there eventually, but
okay. I love those cultural differences that you, and I suppose having to live with them. Now, you are, as I say, growing, correct? Yeah, you are hiring, because that brings me neatly onto one big problem area, which is skills shortages in our lovely, perfectly formed economy. If only we had more skilled workers.
Yeah, that's very true. And if only we had more skilled workers in IT, and actually, if we had more female skilled workers in IT, that would I think that would also make a big difference. So at the moment, the IT market in Ireland is white hot. In that there's a lot of movement, a lot of people are out looking for new roles, a lot of companies are looking to hire a lot of people, and I think that's probably a factor of COVID. People have been at home for almost 2 years. And we got to September, we thought maybe there was some light at the end of the tunnel. And people started to sort of wake up and stretch and think maybe, it's time for a change. I've been sat here for the last 18 months and I'd like to go and do something else. So I think that's fueled the IT economy, but also organizationally, most companies kept the lights on for the last 18 months. So they needed to get on with the programs and projects that they hadn't done last year or this year. And that's built a huge demand in the IT sector.
And I believe if you are a network engineer, you literally name your price. Would that be fair? Or have you heard these stories? Well, I've heard stories that would actually bring tears to the eyes.
Yeah,
tears of happiness if you're a network engineer.
Well, I think, there are certainly some people out there asking for some eye-watering salary changes.
Such as?
Some people are looking for 10, 15, 20% perhaps, and some more.
I was told by a man what knows that you could, if you're top end, now I mean top end, that you could be tipping €350,000, €400,000. Is that now nuts or?
Well, I think that could be nuts, but not to say that there aren't people out there earning it, but certainly I think that would be at the very, very high end, at the top of the apex. But certainly in the general IT market, there's a lot of movement, and that creates problems for companies like us, because obviously we're looking to remain attractive to our current employees, but also looking to understand how do we be attractive to the market. And I think that's where things like diversity and inclusion have really come to the fore, because we've got a very small gene pool in Ireland to pick from. We're all trying to pick from it.
But are you not picking from around Europe as well?
Well, yeah, that's, I think, the one of the other changes that we've seen in the last 2 years is that people are working remotely. So there is the potential, at least, to be working in France or in Germany or anywhere in Europe, or indeed further afield.
But you don't care where they are.
But to some degree. I mean, our clients may. And, there's also tax implications around it, and benefit in kind and all those sort of things. And at the same time, if we were to employ people, let's say, from India, should they be based on an Irish salary because they're working in Ireland, or should they be based on Indian salary because that's where they are? So
I know what the answer they'll say is.
Well, yeah, but I mean, obviously,
350,000, yes, please.
Well, yeah, maybe in rupees, that's what it is. So it's a balancing act, and I think making sure that you're the attractive company, that you are open to everybody joining you. And I know that our company has changed over the last 13 years that I've been there, from probably being a very white Irish male organization to quite a diverse organization. I think today we represent something like 32 different nationalities in our company. And whilst our female population isn't quite where I'd like it, it's at about 28%. Could we get it to 35, 40, even 50% would be great. We have moved the needle.
How do you live that? In other words, how do you actually make sure that that you are doing what you promise that you will do? What do younger, newer employees expect from you and expect to see?
I think what they really are looking to achieve from a career change or even a brand new career, and we have quite an extensive grad program, is that we're going to invest in their career. We're going to continue to invest in their training. We're going to find interesting work for them, and that we're going to reward them, not necessarily just in salaries, but there are other benefits that are there for them. And as long as you continue that, then broadly people are happy with, working for you. But you've got to have interesting work ultimately. Otherwise, they get bored. And
what are the benefits that they actually love? I presume that the pool tables and all, they're old hat. What's new?
What is new? Well, what's interesting is, again, because people have been working from home, is how you can include people
who are working. Doing
that? Well, we've been running a variety of things in the last 18 months. Online bingo, painting competitions for their children.
Really?
Yeah, live jukeboxes where we've hired musicians, which is great. And, you log on in the evening and send them your request and they'll play the song that you want.
Not at all. What you get is you get Phil Cott on the saxophone. That's 3 tunes.
Well, we did that as well. I didn't actually volunteer for that, but we did have an Expleo's Got Talent earlier on in the summer. And again, it's amazing what people can do. So it's being able to reach out in a way that, they're obviously at home. You don't want to intrude on their private time. But at the same time, people do like to feel connected to the company.
We better talk, because it is what you do, about digital transformation, and it is kind of a buzz term. And if you ain't digitally transforming, there's something deeply wrong with your business. Where next? What next? What can we expect in digital transformation? Not necessarily just in Ireland, but around the globe. What's the next big thing?
Sure. It's a difficult one to predict the next big thing. I think
we like that, though. What
we're seeing is a lot more automation of things. So taking out some of that manual work that people do. If you think about lots of people who are working from home, and normally they're part of perhaps a call center or a customer center, a lot of the really difficult jobs can be automated now and make it easier for them, and also enable them to spend more time with the customer. And that should, it should uptick ultimately their revenues or their performance efficiencies. So we're definitely going to see a lot more there. We've invested quite well this year and the end of last year in the life sciences space. Now, life sciences is it's pharmaceuticals, it's medical device, it's healthcare, and again, we're starting to see, and in fact, there was a good example today. Why can't Africa produce its own COVID vaccination drugs? Well, they are going to, but you've got to build the facility. But not only build the facility, you've got to put the facility in, and you've got to test it all. And there's a lot of regulatory around it. So what we find is that in the life sciences, technologically, hugely advanced in pharma. But actually, a lot of what they do is quite a traditional manufacturing method. So I think automation is going to make a big change there. And they're under pressure. So doing whatever they can to automate and not worry. They still have to be regulated, but less so about the regulation. Once that's ticked, how do they actually service the customer? And I think automation is going to help there.
Does Expleo have a specific interest in that whole drugs area? And if so, does that come out of the French parentage, even though you had a German parent before that?
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, this week we announced an acquisition in France of a pharmaceutical company called Assistem Care. Which was...
Well, you're hardly making pharmaceuticals, are you?
No, it's a specialist consultancy that work with pharmaceutical companies.
Because there is a big number of pharmaceutical companies in France, isn't there? It's a very interesting area.
There is,
yeah.
But again, if you bring it to home, I mean, Ireland really punches above its weight in life sciences.
But we have the overseas investors here. We're not manufacturing, we're not creating our own drugs companies here.
No, although we are, there was one recently looking at how they insert into other drugs. So I think we are starting to see that.
It would have happened, of course, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a huge, it's worth something like 90 billion for us here. So we're slightly bigger than the UK in that respect, and close to the German and the French market.
It is incredible.
Huge. Yeah, it's huge.
We should whisper it. Somebody might hear.
Well, interestingly, the hip operations that get done around the world, the likelihood is that you're going to get one that was made in Ireland, because I think about 70% of artificial hips are actually manufactured in Ireland.
And does Expleo have its finger in that hip?
Well, I mean, again, in terms of design, looking at our engineering side of the business, but bringing our IT consultancy to that is where we think in the crosshairs. There's a greater market for us to tap into this year. And then going into 22 and 23.
You've been long enough in business, and you have a fantastic CV that. I wonder, do you remember Hanson Industries? And we're going to take them as an example of, it was a guy called Lord Hanson, and there was another Lord, somebody else, and they did what was very fashionable back in the 70s, 80s, a conglomerate. So you got any business that looked half decent and you threw it into a bucket and you called it Hanson Industries. Similarly, just looking at your own business, I'm not suggesting that you're a bucket or anything, but that it is a conglomeration of different units, if you like. Do you actively try to cross the business, try to extract extra out of them, or do you keep them separate? No,
we are. I mean, it is about bringing the benefit of the tech industry and the engineering industry. And you can see that in the auto industry. So, today, a car isn't really just the combustion engine. It is actually all about the infotainment systems. It's all about the technology. And if you obviously look at all of the new EVs, cars that are coming onto the market, it's about tech. You've got a couple of electronic motors, but it's everything that actually drives that. And then it's the tech that works outside of that. How does the car actually interact with the world outside? How do you as the driver, or perhaps not as the driver, but as the passenger driver, how do you interact with the outside world? So that's all about tech.
I didn't see any part of your CV that you worked in the financial services industry. I don't think you did you?
Well, I've certainly worked with the major banks here in Ireland over the years.
You now will understand my next question. They have tried very often to cross-serve or to integrate businesses, and normally, I'm being very unfair, normally it's a failure. They're just separate units, they are separate businesses, and just because they deal in money in the widest sense, it doesn't normally, 1 and 1 does not normally add up to 2. It might be 1.5, but it's definitely not 2.
Sure. I think if you look at the US and the way the banks operate there, I mean, if you have a checking account, that's that bank there. If you have a mortgage, that's that bank there. And if you have a credit card, that's that bank there. So at least we have those services. I think if you look at the neobanks, the new banks, and certainly Revolut is a great example of that, where, I can make payments, I can deal with cash, but I can also trade. I can trade in commodities. I can save money now. And obviously loans has to be the next thing to come so that Revolut can start to make money. So I think that model going forward, and possibly for the likes of you and I, and looking at you, you're probably the similar vintage to myself. It's not really about us.
Kind of you.
It's more about the new generation that are coming through.
My kids all use Revolut.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And I do too, but only to service my kids.
Well, sorry, that's exactly why I'm getting Revolut as well. Can we tell me, one of our final questions is, who would you hire in a heartbeat?
Oh, can I go with 3?
You may, of course.
Okay, well...
And that's your whys. Because I keep saying to people, I'm not going to put any number on, but it's always good to throw out a few fishing hooks, isn't it?
Well, I think if I was looking for a really good sales guy, David Cameron has to be up there.
The British...
Hey, look,
I'm sorry,
he took a really bad product and he sold it to over 30 million people and got away with it, and also got paid his commission. So
but he hasn't got away with other stuff. I think that's coming down the track tracks. If you read your private eye, there's a big bus coming towards that lad. Okay, well, anyway.
So I do, he's an interesting one. Mary McAleese, I've always held in high esteem. I'm sort of working through her biography at the moment. It's one of those that's on the coffee table. I'll read a chapter when I'm sitting there. But where she came from, the stories that she has to where she got to, and she continues to be, to stand up for the ordinary person, which I think is great.
I have worked with her previously on some projects, and she is such a lovely lady.
Yeah, and I actually bumped into her in the street around the corner from my office during the summer with her husband. No, it wasn't a fast moving clash. But I think the third one, and I've always tracked him, and it's because I worked in Oracle as well for a number of years, is Larry Ellison.
Yeah.
Larry has been really around the block. He continues to be the executive chairman of Oracle. He's still the CTO. So he's still putting his imprimatur, even though he doesn't need the money.
And he's still sailing. He has the most expensive yachts in the world, and I presume it's more than one. Isn't that the same guy? Doesn't he the America's Cup and all this?
He does, yeah. It's interesting because I've also worked for SAP, and Hasso Platz, who is the chief of SAP, is also big into ships or into yachts, and they've both actually raced against each other, and have got up to dirty tricks actually in order to try and win. So yeah, it is boys with big toys in that case.
Well, we'll give Larry a buzz and see whether he'll join you, or if not, he might send on a check.
Well, that would be nice.
He's got plenty of it.
He does indeed.
Phil Codd, thank you so much for joining us on That Great Business Show. And that is it from That Great Business Show, episode 65. My thanks, as always, to the logistically excellent team here at the Dublin Podcast Studios. Peter On Your Bike Rice was today's sound engineer. And remember, Team GBS wants to make many more podcasts. So if your company wants the best podcast production team available, do give us a shout. You will find us on thatgreatbusinessshow.com. My thanks this week to Helen Morrow at Commit Communications for recommending Phil Codd. Nicola Cook at Murray hunted down Alison Campbell. And well done, Chris Deans just keeps turning up here himself, and he's always very, very welcome. We want your ads as well. Wise organisations like Big Red Cloud, Ismi, Udras na Gaeltachta all know that Great Business Show is that great way to talk to Ireland's SMEs. So do talk to us about our competitive rates. Finally, my thanks to our sponsor, defactoshave.com. The world's best shaving oil. Try it for just 1 week, and like me, you will be a forever convert. And if you are talking to people in business around the world, De Facto founder Tom Murphy tells me that he's looking for distributors for De Facto, particularly in North America and Australia. So get in touch with That Great Business Show with any great suggestions. And given the time of year, we're lining up some great guests for the holidays, so make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you will never miss us on what you say is Ireland's best business podcast. So for me, Conal O'Moran, until the next time, Slán.